Hello and welcome to Week 1, Module 1 of English 1302 5-week course. We are going to be looking at what we're doing for the first week. So, you're able to get to this lecture. Good job. Once you've listened to this lecture, you should be able to get to the assignments for the week. This week, we are focusing on our first author, which is Shirley Jackson. And rather than tell you all about her, we've got an assignment that will help with that. And I think it's just better we go through the assignments this week and take a look. So first we'll take a look at the calendar and see what's due for this week. Obviously, there was all the things that you had to do to get to this lecture that were due this week, but also there is something called The Life and Times of Shirley Jackson, which is due on Saturday, as well as the lottery reading and discussion questions and the possibility of evil reading and discussion questions. So the lottery and the possibility of evil are the two stories that we will be reading. Excuse me, sorry about that. All right, so let's take a look at those assignments. So right here into the assignments and module readings, we've got the Life and Times of Shirley Jackson. This is a discussion board, and what you are expected to do with it is to share one interesting fact about Shirley Jackson, the author, um, and it can be about her personal life, her body of work, or how her work is impacting us today. Um, and I'd like for you to share a fact and why you find it interesting. But the trick is that you need to be the first to share that fact. So no duplicate facts, which means you'll be able to see everybody else's posts before you post. So if you're the first person, congratulations, you get to post whatever you want. But if you're not, you need to look and see what everybody else has posted and then don't use those same facts. There are plenty of facts to go around, I assure you. So be sure you go out there and find one that is unique and tell me why you think it's interesting. And um, make sure that you respond to 2 other classmates' posts. Now, you'll notice on all of our discussion boards, there are 2 due dates. The first one is the one that you need to post your initial post by. In other words, you need to make that post, I believe for this one, the 10th. Your first post has to be, I believe that's a Friday, and then you need to reply to 2 other people by the next day, which would be the Saturday. So make sure that you are keeping track of that, those 2 different due dates. It's basically there just to remind you that you still have to reply to somebody else. But find an interesting fact, and we'll have a class discussion about that here in this discussion board. So that's the Life and Times of Shirley Jackson. Now I want to make sure that we know who Shirley Jackson is. So let me share an image of her. This is Shirley Jackson that we are talking about. Now, this other very important Shirley Jackson also comes up, but she is not the author that we are talking about. I believe she has more to do with the science side of things, and that's great. But we are really looking at Shirley Jackson, the literary author. So make sure you're talking about the right one. This Shirley Jackson and not the scientist. All right, that being said, let's move on. So the Life and Times of Shirley Jackson is the first assignment. Uh, then I have the readings, the lottery, and the possibility of evil. Now, when you click into these, there's a lot going on in here, so I want to make sure that we understand. So you're being asked to read the short story, and then I also include an audio of, in this particular case, it's actually Shirley Jackson herself reading the lottery for you, but you can read along here, and I highly suggest that you read it yourself and then listen to the audio because you will get more out of it that way. And this is what we call psychological horror. So that's part of it. It's not like creepy, bloody, scary, that sort of thing. No jump scares, but it is the genre she wrote in. So it's worth reading it yourself and then possibly listening to it while you read in through it, because you are going to be responsible for answering these discussion questions. And this is a separate assignment. Um, so you're going to be answering these 7 discussion questions, preferably with complete sentences. And you'll be turning that in here, and that will be due on Saturday. And then we also have the possibility of evil, which is set up the exact same way. The instructions, the audio of someone reading the story. This case is not Shirley Jackson, which is unfortunate, um, but someone else who does a pretty good job. Here is the story, The Possibility of Evil. Again, I highly suggest that you read through it first and then listen to it if possible. And then you have these 7 discussion questions to answer about that story. Now, this will be the only time that we are actually turning in the discussion questions for the stories that we're reading, simply due to time constraints, since this is a really short class. However, there will be discussion questions that you will be responsible for knowing on the other 2 stories. But for sure, these are the 2 assignments here. So far, you've got The Life and Times of Shirley Jackson and the 2 discussion questions. And then next week we will have the discussion board and we will talk more about the actual writing assignment, um, which I believe you will have access to take a look at the instructions for the assignment, which are here. And I will go into more detail about them with week two's lecture, but it is a uh, research essay in no fewer than 1,000 words. It means it has to be at least 1,000 words, and it's going to be your choice of these 2 prompts. You can choose prompt 1, or prompt 2, both of which are designed to go with a specific story. So prompt 1 generally goes with the lottery, prompt 2 generally goes with the possibility of evil. These are the requirements. It's going to be an MLA paper with in-text citations and a works cited page. Um, Ignore those dates. We'll change those by the time you see this. And basically, you're free to read through those instructions there. Now, the submission link is separate and it won't be due until the 18th of July. Um, but the instructions are here because while you can get to the instructions on here, you have to scroll through several pages to get to them, and it's very inconvenient. So I set this one up just so you can see the instructions. So there will be revisions on this essay should you choose to or need to make them, but those won't be due till the end of the course, and we'll talk more about those next week in week 2. But this week we are just introducing who Shirley Jackson is and the stories uh, that we'll be reading. And what you're going to do is take those stories and apply some of the concepts and topics that are in the stories to real life situations in the research report. And again, the instructions for that is here, but we'll go through those in a lot more detail next week. And also, we'll go over what MLA formatting is. If you're curious about taking a look at it beforehand, you can find information on MLA formatting in the writing resources. And I highly encourage you to take some extra time this week and read through the articles about what is research writing, uh, specifically, because it's not quite the same as just writing a opinion essay. You do have to have outside sources. Um, Again, that's in the instructions. I guess probably worth mentioning that you will need to have 2 academic sources for this essay, as well as referencing one of the Jackson stories. So the academic sources, again, we'll talk more about where to find those, usually the library. It's either a book or a journal or journal article, journal entry. Sometimes Google Scholar can help, but there's a difference between scholarly sources and popular media sources, which we will get more into next week. But if you were reading through in the essential materials, there is some information about understanding bias that can we'll talk about that, and also evaluating sources. The CRAP test is actually really good about checking on currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose in your sources, which is what CRAP stands for: currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So there you go. If you have any questions, please be sure to email me. You should be able to, like I said, it's all pretty self-explanatory, assuming that you read the instructions, but I am happy to answer questions, assuming that they aren't already in the instructions. Uh, so good luck and have a good first week.